Welcome to an online content module for the 8th grade Georgia Standards of Excellence in Social Studies. The Georgia Standards of Excellence will often be referred to as the GSE throughout this module. Today we'll be talking about what students need to understand about personal finance in the 8th grade GSE. These standards include some of the most common topics usually associated with teaching personal finance, including budgets, savings, and debt. At this grade level, we bump up the rigor in how these concepts are taught, taking it beyond the vocabulary level and into the higher order thinking skills of using reasoning, evaluation, and judgment to explain a complex concept. For example, rather than just identifying or describing the features of effective personal money management, students are being asked to synthesize everything they know about personal finance to understand the reasons, benefits, and risks of various financial choices. Be sure to plan for student-centered activities that require them to describe and explain these concepts using rationale. As we look at each element individually, we will discover some engaging and logical ways to accomplish this. Students have been learning about the word income for many years, starting in kindergarten, so the term should not be new to them. For example, working with previous standards has taught them that income is earned by working through trading one's labor. It is limited, and income is part of a budget used for spending and saving. In 8th grade, we seek to build on these years of studying aspects of individual economics so that students leave middle school with a framework of all of the components of a sound personal financial management plan that can help them reach their individual goals. In 6th and 7th grade, students learned that around the world, literacy rates have been linked to national economic health. Remind them of this background knowledge that they have and challenge them to find out if the same is true for an individual's economic health. Using a resource like the Occupational Outlook Handbook, published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, students can engage in inquiry to find out why the value of labor changes based on levels of training. The link for this is available at the end of this presentation. A full consideration of income cannot be made without realizing that life choices impact the level of income that can be earned, and this is an ideal time for students to be exposed to this fact. As a matter of fact, it may be very helpful to you to use goal setting as a lens through which students examine the importance of income. The term starting point, as it is used in this element, suggests that teachers should conceptually frame students' understanding of the relevance of income through goal setting. Students can be best helped to understand the value of sound personal financial management by considering some of their own financial goals, such as the age at which they want to buy their car. Picturing themselves reaching future financial goals can be a strong motivator for learning sound money management skills. But first, students have to gain experience in seeing current costs as well as income expectations in order to compare the two and develop an appreciation for information about savings and credit that they will learn through the other elements in this standard. When you use instructional strategies such as simulations or perspective taking, students are able to draw the conclusion you are aiming for in terms of income being the starting point for personal financial management. A note of caution is warranted whenever we talk about this topic. Personal financial management is, well, personal. Please be sensitive about the needs of your student population and be aware of financial challenges your students may face. Don't underestimate the relevance of this caveat, as far too many students in our Georgia public schools live in poverty and low-income circumstances, as this 2014 graph shows. In 2015, Georgia ranked 46 out of 50 states in terms of child poverty rates. So it's really important that we keep our students' experiences in mind when planning to teach this topic. Use examples of wise financial management choices that are realistic for the experiences most of your students have. Talking about buying a new car with students who are experiencing homelessness, for example, isn't helpful, and it isn't what the standard requires. So use examples that will be meaningful to your students. Because students have been learning about budgeting since 4th grade, teachers of 8th grade social studies will need to consider what their students are ready for to add to their knowledge of budgeting. The wording of this standard goes beyond the technical aspects of budgeting to some of the deeper concepts of the purposes and benefits of wise budgeting. Developing a plan for how to work towards one's financial goals will seem logical for students if they've participated in the activities suggested around the topic of income in this standard. A budget is a plan that consists of these features. And time is rarely listed as one of the characteristics of a budget, and we might assume that it is implicitly understood. But students at this age are ready to consider the ramifications of the frequency of receiving income and how that impacts their budget. Getting paid by the week, bi-weekly, or monthly creates significant differences in the way one budgets, as does having irregular amounts of income. You can incorporate some of these variables to help them see the challenges inherent in creating a realistic plan to meet financial goals. At this time, it's also helpful to revisit the differences between needs and wants and how this impacts the budget process. Even though the car example given earlier is typically a highly desirable goal for many teens, it is usually not defined as a need when one lives in areas in which other transportation methods are feasible. Too often we assume that topics related to budgeting lack the rigor of this grade level. However, the more these concepts are applied to real-world decisions that adults engage in on a daily basis, the more likely it is that your students will not only master this concept, but also take on some important attitudes that will be of lifelong assistance to them. Student learning is supported by lessons that ask them to generate the reasons for and benefits of budgeting. A simple activity would be to give students task cards with real-life circumstances such as getting married, getting your dream job, buying a house, getting laid off, etc. Their task would be to respond to a prompt asking them how having a working budget could make their situation better, or how the lack of a budget could cause trouble in their circumstance. This is a list of some of the most commonly understood benefits of budgeting, but it is not by any means exhaustive. Many of the ways budgets benefit people are individual to their financial situations, so it's best not to try to limit this element to one set of right answers, but to engage students in developing new ideas about the reasons we budget. Whatever way you plan to teach this concept, be sure to use an engaging method involving role-playing, research, classroom discussion, document analysis, or any other number of methods shown to support mastery of these standards. For more ideas on how to effectively plan student-centered learning, be sure to view the instructional activities videos at your grade level. The reasons for and benefits of saving money shown here are not comprehensive, but should also be a good indicator of what your students understand about the value of including saving as a regular part of their budget. Young people aren't well known for their inherent ability to delay gratification, and choosing to save money may run counter to their intuition. This is a great chance to remind students of an economic concept learned in earlier years, since it relates so well to the topic of saving: opportunity costs. Remember that opportunity cost means that by choosing to do one thing with my money, that I forego other things that I might have done with that same dollar amount. Putting $50 in savings a month means that I won't have that $50 to spend, so there must be a greater good that is served by me putting the $50 in savings. Helping students to identify these potentially greater good scenarios will help them to get at the heart of this element. Although the language of this standard doesn't include interest, it is certainly implied when talking about the benefits of savings and the risks of debt. Therefore, plan to introduce your students to the topic of interest as it applies here. An engaging way to do that is through the use of online interest calculators, such as that offered on the website themint.org. Let's go there for a minute and explore what this site has to offer your students. You'll see that it has the main topics that are contained in your standards, and if we click here on savings, there are a number of ways that they can get the idea of what it means to be able to improve their wealth through the savings process. One way they can do it is what we talked about in terms of setting long or short-term goals, and that's what this activity was for. Another way is to use their compounding calculator to give students an opportunity to really see how money can grow using different savings methods. So for example, if they want to save $100 each year by putting it in a bank account that has a regular savings interest, and how many years they might say, well, I'm in 8th grade now, so I want to go ahead and save until I'm out of high school. What would I have at that point? So after 5 years using an average interest rate, this is how much they would have, and that gives them an opportunity then to say, well, what if I saved more, or what if I used another method of savings to help me grow my money more? Interest also really comes into play when we want to talk to them about the next element, about debt. Using a debt calculator like this one will help them to see some of the high interest things that they might want to do, such as maybe going to a concert. Will help them to see, okay, well, the concert really originally cost this much, and I can pay this much a month, or I can pay as little as this much a month. Using this interest rate, that's a typical interest rate that might be around, they could say, okay, well, I'll pay $20 a month for those concert tickets, and it would take me 11 months for that one night of fun at the concert, and I'd pay well over the cost of the tickets also. So them being able to have experience using debt calculators, interest calculators, will give them an opportunity to see the real world applications of that concept. In our complex market system, it isn't usually a matter of if we will have debt, but how we will manage the use of the credit so that we can minimize the risks of being in debt. Why do we have credit? Simply put, because most people cannot afford the costs of getting ahead in terms of car and home ownership or even obtaining a college education. We may not like the idea of talking to students about debt, but it's a prevalent feature of the lives of most Americans, so it's best to help them understand that there are appropriate or valid uses of debt and inappropriate or invalid uses. Weighing the cost of being in debt must again include the factors of time, including the time that this purchase will benefit you and the time needed to pay off the debt. For example, because of the high benefit associated with a college education, most people are willing to shoulder the burden of debt that comes along with acquiring that education. Inappropriate uses of debt include short-term purchases like groceries and regular bills like utilities, both of which are best handled through the budgeting process. Another inappropriate use of debt is the purchase of luxury, incidental, or other non-essential items, which are best acquired in accordance with your savings plan. The general rule of thumb is that we only take on debt if the long-term benefits outweigh the actual costs of acquiring the loan. There are numerous risks associated with debt. Some of the most important ones are listed here. Overuse causes us to use credit and enlarge debt when we really didn't need to. It's also easy to lose track of how much we are actually paying because the cost of debt, including the interest, comes much later after the actual purchase is made, which disconnects the buyer from immediate costs. It's also far too easy to waste money on the fees associated with debt and can ultimately make it impossible to qualify for affordable interest rates for credit in the future. In short, being unable to manage debt efficiently is a serious risk that our students need to be aware of, so that as they enter young adulthood, they have the knowledge needed to avoid these pitfalls. This video has shown how some of the most common topics associated with teaching personal finance, including budgets, savings, and debt, can be taught using reasoning, evaluation, and judgment to accomplish the goal of the standard, explaining and describing the complex interactions of an effective personal money management system. This means that there will be lots of activities in your classroom that require students to use language and graphics to demonstrate their understandings. These are some of the links discussed in this video. We hope that you have enjoyed this presentation and that the information it contains will support you in providing excellent instruction on the 8th grade Georgia Standards of Excellence in Social Studies.